Dr. Julio Ataide graduated with top honors from university and rose through the ranks of the top Brazilian oil company. He climbed up from junior assistant to one of the best petroleum engineers in his home country. Hours were long and pay was average, but Julio took advantage of every opportunity. He wed a fine artist named Cristina, who herself had a promising career with her sculptures. His work caught the eye of Mr. Hendrik Blomkamp, chief financial officer of Van Arden Oil and Gas. He wanted to hire Julio to come to Dredford to build an oil platform in the ocean from scratch. The payment was huge. He was assured that this job was only the prelude to further opportunities, and his new employer would take care of the relocation expenses. He had to talk with his wife Cristina. At first, she was not too keen on the idea, but relented since it was a great opportunity for her husband. They relocated to Dredford. He started to oversee the construction of the platform, while Cristina worked to rebuild her career. He did everything he could to be with her, but eerie accidents started to hinder the construction of the platform. As a result, Cristina was finding herself alone more and more often. Delays, accidents, even storms threw the timetable of the construction off the rails. He felt like the work was being sabotaged, haunting shadows in the oil rig, and whispers cursed the place. He worked harder and started to stay longer on board as the oil platform took shape. Mr. Blomkamp came to visit periodically, and Julio wanted to show considerable progress on each visit. That year, he missed both Christmas and New Year's Eve with his wife. Cristina would spend the holidays alone. In the second year, what appeared to be an accident took place. Julio was working late at night and suddenly an explosion caused a fire to spread out of control. Debris fell over him and he had one of his legs crushed. It was a miracle that he was rescued and taken into the city by helicopter. In recovery, he remembered two shadows running before the explosion. He thought about giving up. Conspiracies brewed in his mind as if an evil force didn't want the work to be done. On the next day, Mr. Blomkamp came to visit and wanted to know how quickly he could get back to work, and to Julio's own surprise, he agreed to continue from the hospital bed. He lost part of the movement of his wounded leg and needed a cane from that day forward. Cristina came to visit him every day during his recovery and was frantic with his decision to continue working on the project. They had the worst fight of their relationship, and he promised her that the work would be completed soon. They would leave this cursed city behind. At home, he noticed many new sculptures made by his wife that he had never seen before. Soon, he was working on board again. He had to catch up after the accident. Julio would spend the next months totally focused on finishing his work. It was almost done. He got approval to double his team and started working around the clock. Mishaps still plagued the oil rig, but his crew would deal with anything that could draw his focus from the main project. Time started flying fast, and the progress was increasing steadily. He could not believe himself when he was ready to proclaim the construction finished. He tried to reach Cristina, to no avail. He was informed that she had left many messages to him during the last few months. To his dismay, he learned she had fallen ill and had been admitted to Dredford's General Hospital with a very aggressive cancer. The doctors suspected the chemicals and substances used in her work were the cause. They were very clear that her life expectancy was very limited. When Julio entered the room and saw her, he felt a punch in the gut. She was weak and anemic, sunken eyes barely open. He never imagined seeing her in such a frail state. She could barely speak. They cried, and the guilt was overwhelming. Julio asked to talk with the best doctors available, and for hours he tried to find a small glimmer of hope. But they all said the same thing. In a daze, Julio did not notice when Mr. Blomkamp sat right next to him in the corridor of the hospital. He believed the doctors had given up, and her death was imminent. Even so, he belonged to a lodge that can accomplish impossible things, and saving her was within their means. This caught Julio's attention, but he had a hard time believing the words. He wanted to know how this lodge would be able to do the impossible, and why they do that for him. Mr. Blomkamp answered that the lodge would require one thing in return. Julio would have to join it with all it entails. To give him proof before his decision, Mr. Blomkamp said she would recover tonight and would spend the whole day tomorrow in good health. But on the next night, she would return to her current state, and he would have to make a decision. When Julio entered Cristina's room, she was sitting on the bed looking perfectly well. He could not believe his eyes. They embraced, and he told her that the construction was done. They spent the whole night together. The doctors were perplexed. No one could understand what had transpired. She was full of life and they had a great time. During the day, he hoped that maybe it was all over, but as soon as the sun went down, She was back to her sickly complexion again. Julio ran to the same corridor, and there was Mr. Blomkamp sitting at the same place. Julio took a few moments looking into the pale man's eyes, and before his boss could say anything, he just said, he agreed. Mr. Blomkamp extended cold hands, and when Julio shook them, he said with a smile in the corner of his mouth,
"Welcome into the lodge."
Julio would have never believed that Dreadford Public Library was home to a family of vampires, or Nosferatu as they called themselves. But now he was one of them, a member of House Ashkari, the House of the Owl as his sire taught him. The elder of the house, Van Arden, was the representative of the house at the King's Council and sire to 5 Nosferatu. Now one of these 5, Hendrik, was his sire. Due to their increased thirst for blood compared to other vampires, their numbers remained low. Dreadford had another particular reason to ostracize Nosferatu from their house. Hendrik told him they came from outside the city during the last decade of the 19th century with an important mission. He did not elaborate on this mission but made it very clear that the eternities of all the members of their family depended on it.
Can't you tell me more about this mission? If my future or Christina's depend on it, I would like to know all about it.
In time, Julio. For now, you must understand that Van Arden was sent here to do something vital for the well-being of this family. He came from Europe with 2 children, Sebastian Esterhazy, the eldest, and Agnes Horvath, our librarian. Those early times were hard. We were the target of suspicion from all other houses. They worked to gain acceptance, and eventually, we were admitted as part of the court of Dreadford.
So you're saying other vampires distrust us?
Most Nosferatu distrust everyone, Julio. Living for a long time having to feed from the blood of another is not easy on the mind. Having to fight our Nephilim to keep us from losing ourselves to our condition does not help either.
Nephilim? What does it mean, Mr. Blomkamp?
Inside each one of us there is an ancient evil, Julio. Something that drives us to turn into monstrous beings. Giving into it is easy and rewarding, but you will not like where it takes you. Fighting against it is painful and costly, but keeps you who you are. There are 12 Nephilim, 1 for each house of the blood. Nosferatu condition and powers are derived from them. I like to think ours, the owl, is not the worst one. There are some truly terrifying Nephilim, but I digress.
Julio was astounded to hear about ancient disembodied spirits and vampires. This man, or rather Nosferatu, held so much knowledge within his mind. He felt like a child learning the basics all over again.
We live and die by our knowledge, it defines us. Van Arden brought 2 local people into the blood of the house. Eugene, our tech-savvy enthusiast, and Candace, our most powerful sorceress. Later, I myself was turned into a Nosferatu as the youngest of our house. Now this position falls to you, as my child.
Julio looked around into the old library and found an enormous tome about sorcery.
So it is true that we are sorcerers and magic exists. Not only vampires, but sorcery. Unbelievable. Don't tell me I should beware of werewolves as well.
Yes, magic exists. There is Ars Sanguinis, our hermetic and alchemical magic that studies the fundamentals of the vampiric blood. Ars Rosa, considered by many to be holy or divine magic. Ars Mortis, commonly referred to as necromancy or death magic. Ars Spina, or thorn magic, a pagan and shamanistic type of magic. Ars Infernum, commonly known as profane magic, and the Scholomance. All of them are fueled by the power of our own cursed blood, but there is magic derived from mana, an ethereal energy that only mortals can wield among many others. And if you see a werewolf, run. No one likes a hero.
I've always thought people who believed in this type of stuff were foolish. Christina will be amazed, absolutely amazed.
Christina must never know anything. Remember, we are bound by the theater. The King's Council will not hesitate to destroy you and her if you risk it. She will be taken care of as part of our agreement, but she will have to take special medicine for the rest of her life. As long as she does it, her disease won't bother her. And please return the book exactly to where you removed it from. or Agnes will kill me as if I were a member of the tower.
The tower? I don't think I remember hearing anything about it before.
The tower is the antithesis of the court. Nosferatu of the tower are stuck in the old ways of our kind and are deranged, dangerous fanatics. They fight for control of Dreadford against the court and the king. They have done so for as long as they have moved into the city in the 18th century.
Mr. Blomkamp, there's one thing I would like to know. One thing that cost me dearly. Why was the oil platform built? Are vampires really looking forward to making money with offshore oil?
The platform was a personal project of mine. You see, Julio, our house is in danger at every corner, be it the court and its deadly politics or the tower and their constant harassment. Here in this library, we are too vulnerable. We do have wards and spells protecting it, but I have worked hard to convince my siblings and sire to move our house into somewhere safe and out of reach. The structure you built for us on the sea. But enough questions for now. You won't learn our arts if you don't study hard. Let's work to make you into a member of this house in more than name and blood. Your first step is the rite of arcane revelation.
They took the stairs leading underground. There he found 5 other Nosferatu in a dimly lit chamber full of candles and incense. The family's most ancient and revered texts were arranged on pedestals and altars, ready to be consulted, and Hendrik took his place among his brothers and sisters.
The purpose of this ceremony is to initiate a new member into our lodge. You must pass on a test if we are to grant access to the family's most guarded secrets and knowledge.
An elderly vampire appeared to be conducting the ceremony, and Julio was directed to the middle of the room, where a book lay closed, seemingly sealed by magic. He was instructed to open it. Inside, he would find the first teachings of his tutor, but he would have to manage the simple incantation to undo the locking spell on the book by himself. He was told that everything he needed to do so was inside the room and within his mind and blood. Julio felt a rush of invigoration by the challenge. He passed the next couple hours looking into the texts available to him and reciting different incantations. He tried to understand what made the spell function using the same scientific mindset he applied to his work. While he toiled, the other vampires stood still, no breath or movement. Their attention focused on him and his work, as if they were judging his every act and his performance. The bloodling mage could tell his research was exposing him to wisdom and insights contained within the texts that were still far beyond his reach, but the early contact with them fed his curiosity more and more. At the start of the second hour, Julio paused, taking a deep breath. He whispered to himself,
"This is it. I can do this."
With newfound determination, he let a drop of his blood fall on the leather cover of the book and recited the incantation which broke the spell.
Before you open it, do you swear to safeguard the secrets and security of the family? Do you vow to uphold the values of wisdom, truth, and discretion in the pursuit of arcane knowledge?
I vow to keep the family secure and protect its secrets. If I fail to pursue the values of wisdom, truth, and discretion, may I face the consequences of my actions.
The elderly vampire congratulated Julio. After that, a gentleman with an old-fashioned beard and mustache approached the bloodling.
This was a fine display. I salute you.
He gave a cane to Julio as a welcoming present, who noticed it had a sword hidden inside.
The book you received for passing the test is a gift from me. May it become a repository of all the wisdom and knowledge you acquire.
The librarian gave him a kind smile and was followed by a charming and charismatic man.
When you return to your room, you will find all the paraphernalia you need to practice alchemy in Ars Sanguinis. Welcome aboard.
Lastly, a red-haired woman with intense eyes approached Julio. She handed him an amber amulet, in silence.
Thank you. But what is it for?
It helps when you do fire magic, working as a catalyst. I will wait to give any welcome or congratulations when you have accomplished something of note. Any charlatan could have solved that locking spell. You have cost us a valuable right to blood. Make yourself worth it.
I will make a fine mage out of him.
Hendrik caught Candice off guard. They exchanged a glance that told Julio that there was history between them, but he thought better keep it to himself. With this, Julio concluded his rite of initiation and was ready to learn magic with his teacher. He emerged from the underground chamber transformed. He carried the weight of the knowledge he started to acquire and the responsibility to uphold the oath and duty to his new family. The next few nights flew by as Julio learned with his sire the fundamentals of the ars sanguinis, and the manipulation of the elements and the four humors.
You see, Julio, we are the keepers of the secrets of the blood.
He picked a rack with 3 test tubes filled with blood.
Since Babylon, the ancient wise men realized that if you leave blood undisturbed for about an hour, it will clot, and it will divide itself into 4 different layers.
He picked up one of the tubes, shook it, and whispered an incantation. When he stopped, the blood inside separated into the 4 layers.
The bottom layer is called melanocole, from the Greek, black bile.
He pointed to a dark clot formed at the bottom.
It relates to autumn, adulthood, and to earth. On top of it, there is the erythros, from the Greek meaning red. It relates to spring, to infancy, and to the element of air.
He pointed to a layer made of red liquid, and in sequence to the layer above, a whitish one.
After, there is the phlegm, associated with winter, old age, and the element of water. And lastly, the yellow layer is made of choler, associated with summer, youth, and the element of fire.
He shook the test tube again, reciting another incantation, and when he stopped, it had turned to blood again.
When you master all 4 humors, melena, erythros, phlegm, and choler, and therefore the 4 elements, earth, air, water, and fire, you will be able to master the 5th element, the hema, the blood.
He put the test tube back into the rack.
Each of these 4 humors is also linked to a temperament. House Ashkari learned how to derive each one from our vampiric blood, and through them, how to control the elements and concepts associated with each. As an apprentice, you are going to learn how to manipulate the first one of your choice, choler. As you progress, you will learn each of the 4 until you can unlock the master element.
Julio was amazed by what his blood was capable of, and the first time he cast a fire spell, he could not believe himself. During these nights, he was fed blood brought to him in wine glasses and heated in the microwave. This was the most difficult part to get used to. The thirst was immense, and from the moment he woke up until he laid down, he felt it. Practicing his magic only made it worse, so he had to drink copious amounts of blood to keep it sated. He dreaded the time he would have to take his blood from a living person. Meanwhile, Cristina was under observation at the Dreadfords General Hospital. She had been cured and the doctors were ready to release her. Julio missed his wife dearly. After several nights of studying with unwavering commitment the lessons his sire imparted to him, he approached Hendrik.
Hendrik, may I have your permission to visit Cristina?
Hendrik sighed, reluctance evident in his eyes.
Julio, I must remind you of the risks of wandering around alone. After your presentation to the King's Council, your face is known to many. There are factions and enemies out there who would love to strike a blow against House Ashkari by hurting you. They see you as a pawn in a larger game. If they capture or kill you, it could weaken our position significantly.
I understand, but I need to see her, Hendrik. Ensuring Cristina's well-being was the primary reason for me to accept this deal.
Hendrik shook his head.
You are also unaccustomed to your thirst. Ours is not like any other. You pose a danger to people, including Cristina.
Please, I need to see her, especially after everything that has happened.
Hendrik crossed his arms, considering Julio's plea.
You do realize that if you lose control, even for a moment, it could have disastrous consequences. For you, for Cristina, and for our house.
Julio nodded.
I do, but I've been practicing restraint. I can't handle this, Hendrik. I have to handle this.
Hendrik's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm.
The council will not look kindly on any mistakes. You cannot tell her anything that would violate our laws.
Julio took a deep breath.
I won't make any mistakes, I promise. Just let me see her. I need to make sure she's alright. She deserves that.
Hendrik paused, his eyes searching Julio's face for any sign of doubt. Finally, he nodded.
All right, but the meeting will be brief. I will accompany you to the hospital, and my best familiar will be the driver and provide security.
Julio felt a wave of relief wash over him.
Thank you, Hendrik. I appreciate this more than you know.
Don't thank me yet. This isn't without risk. We must be careful, Julio. One misstep could cost us all dearly.
I understand. I won't let you down.
They arrived at the hospital after midnight. At the last minute, Hendrik decided to increase the security with a second armed familiar who would escort Julio at all times. The parking lot was dark and silent. The four men immediately felt something eerie. Julio quickly rushed to the elevator and called it being followed closely by one of the familiars. A flickering light was the only source of illumination while they waited. An incessant buzz came from the light piercing the silence. The familiar at his side anxiously surveyed the entire empty garage. Finally, the elevator bell marked its arrival. Suddenly, before the doors opened, a dark chain wrapped up the familiar's left leg and with a single pull yanked the man away from Julio.
What are you searching for, little owl? Be careful of what you may find. Are you lost?
The temperature had a sudden drop and the room started to get very cold. The familiar fought for his life against a chain made of solid shadow and ice, trying to completely engulf him like a snake. He drew his gun and tried to shoot it. To Julio's surprise, the room got unnaturally silent. The gun did not produce any sound, neither did the struggle. Suddenly, the familiar's gun came sliding on the floor and stopped near him, insinuating his death. Julio did not think twice and took it in his hands. He expected his heart to be racing, but all he felt was cold and numbness. His body was truly dead. He backed down slowly, gun at the ready. He noticed someone coming out of the elevator and standing behind him. Julio turned around to face a beast of a man with a stern expression, behind a long, scruffy beard, matching his long and greasy black hair. Without delay, the man raised his fists and punched Julio like a train. Bones cracked, piercing his flesh. He fell back down to the ground and, in a split second, raised his gun and fired against his foe. A smile grew beneath the beard as Julio fired again. The man's eyes had a sinister look, and he did not appear to be bothered by the gun. He took it from Julio's hands as if taking a toy from a child, and signaled to the woman who talked before. Sound returned to the room. Julio saw a beautiful brunette woman step into the light, blood at the corners of her mouth.
I am going to give you a single chance, child.
Julio drew his sidearm and shot the man in the face.
Admirable, but ill-advised.
The huge man spoke, his face as if nothing had happened. He reached out with an open hand to grab Julio, but the apprentice was pulled away from him by an invisible force. Hendrik, with a swift gesture, had intervened and used a spell to move him out of the way. He felt himself carried by the invisible force and thrust back into the car he came in. Hendrik stood outside, positioned between the vehicle and the two vampires.
Take him away from here!
Hendrik commanded the second familiar, who was in the driver's seat. The dark chain slithered towards the car with a menacing speed, but Hendrik intercepted it with the same spell he used to move Julio, creating an invisible barrier that halted its advance. With a swift motion, Hendrik followed up with a blast of cold and ice that shot towards the woman, the air crackling with frost, but she quickly shrugged it off, her skin seemingly impervious to the cold. She raised her hand, summoning a swirling vortex of dark energy that coiled around her. Hendrik pressed on, unleashing another barrage of icy blasts, but the dark energy absorbed the attacks, rendering them ineffective.
Cold against a powerful basilisk? Are you dense? You are trying to heroically save the child, but you are the prize, halfwit.
The huge man advanced, his steps slow and deliberate. Hendrik pivoted, casting a series of fast spells forming sigils in the air. These sigils exploded into elemental bursts upon contact with the man, ice, lighting, earth. Yet he continued forward, unfazed and relentless. The man swung a massive fist, knocking Hendrik off balance. The familiar started the car and rushed for the exit.
No, stop! He needs help, please!
The driver ignored his plea, and Julio heard the doors of the car locking. He looked back to his sire and saw him kneeling, wounded. The huge man appeared to have endured his spells as easily as he had endured the gunshots, and now had his hands over Hendrik, who remained resolute, facing the towering figure with defiance. The last thing Julio saw before they departed the parking lot was his sire turning to ashes.
No one likes a hero.
The drops of rain fell from the sky like the tears of a father who lost his son. Daniel Reed shifted his umbrella and sighted with his back to the church doors.
You still have not lost that habit, my son?
Father Michael said, announcing his arrival.
I'm not your son.
But you are. Nonetheless, I have something for you.
He smiled amicably and reached under his jacket and retrieved a pouch where coins clinked together.
This is from DuPont. as a reward from your last job.
The detective took the pouch in his hands and looked into the contents. It was a number of gold coins.
Gold?
In our society, gold, silver, and blood are the only currency. There is, of course, the occasional favor. If you need to buy goods and services, that is the way. No one accepts cash, except for the very young among us such as yourself.
Daniel Reed put the pouch inside his trench coat and turned to leave, but Father Michael called for his attention.
You know, to be rewarded in this manner means he has you in high esteem. It is smart to keep the goodwill of a member of the council. It could save your eternity one day.
What do you want, Michael? Don't play games with me. Be direct or leave me alone.
What I mean is that another member of the council, Adrian Van Arden from the House Ashkari, is in need of help. 2 members of the tower, Ivan, the preacher, and Antoinette, the Velvet Shade, destroyed his youngest son, Hendrik Blomkamp, a couple of nights before.
Hendrik just brought someone into the blood, right? What was his name? Julio?
Precisely. He disappeared after the attack. Usually in the council, DuPont and Caroline Graves vote together. On the other hand, Spector and Holloway vote together, leaving the rancher and Van Arden with the casting votes. If we could have Van Arden on our side, it would strengthen our position against Bloody Mary and Yelena.
So you want me to find Julio and bring him back?
Splendid.
Father Michael told him to look for the council member at the Dreadford Public Library, and as Daniel Reed approached its door, his acute senses heard.
Don't worry, old man. If you don't want the help from the Shire Reaver, it is your prerogative. But if the shit hits the fan, don't come knocking.
Bartholomew, you know I respect you, but as soon as I involve you in this, I'll have to open the doors of our library to court officials. And you know I cannot let this happen.
So you are gonna use DuPont's lackey?
I don't have another choice.
You and me go way back, Adrian. Remember who helped you and your children when everybody in this wretched city was suspicious of your house. The house of the betrayer.
Don't speak of it, Bartholomew. You and I have been acquaintances for a long time, and I do not forget a favor, as you well know.
The door opened, and a young man wearing black jeans, black shirt under a leather jacket and sunglasses stepped out, followed by an old man with long silver hair wearing a red robe and walking with a cane.
Look who we got here. Daniel Reed, private detective. I have all my eyes on you, puppet.
The young man said as he left.
Don't mind him.
Van Arden reassured Daniel Reed.
Please come in.
They went in and Van Arden closed the door.
So, Mr. Van Arden, how can I help you?
Well, Mr. Reed, I must assume you already heard about the destruction of my youngest child, Hendrik.
Yes, sir, I've heard about it.
What you certainly don't know is that the new leadership of the tower has a personal grudge against my house. It's been some time now that they have been sabotaging our attempts to promote a more secure environment for our family. Hendrik and his child, Julio, were the ones working on this project. Now that Hendrik is gone, this responsibility will befall on Julio alone, but he has disappeared, and that is where you come in.
What makes you think he is not gone as well?
We are a family of magicians, Mr. Reed. Be assured we have our own ways to know.
Well, if you think it is kidnapping, did you receive a ransom note?
No, that is my fear. They do not intend to exchange him, but to extract what he knows from his mind and then discard him.
You want to protect your secrets?
Mr. Reed, make no mistake. My family is the most dear thing to me in all my eternity. I would not think twice to set this whole city ablaze to save even one of them, especially my only grandchild from my recently destroyed son.
Van Arden had an intense look on his eyes as he spoke, and it did not need anything else to convince Daniel, who had seen with his own eyes the old gentleman setting another vampire on fire, but with a gesture at his introduction.
Okay, sir, take me to his quarters then.
One thing, Mr. Reed, before we start. The reason I am trusting you, and therefore DuPont, is because this house holds many secrets. If I had accepted the help from the Shire Reaver, I would have to invite Nosferatu from all houses here. And that is something I cannot afford for the sake of my children.
I understand, sir. You can trust me.
That is the thing, Mr. Reed. I need some reassurance on that trust. For that, I'll need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement, as it is the business parlance.
Van Arden pulled a parchment from his robe, and Daniel got a pen.
No, Mr. Reed. I'll need you to sign it in blood.
After signing the contract, Van Arden took Daniel to Julio's quarters. The detective sifted through the belongings. He saw engineering books, notebooks, notes, drawings, and lots of calculations. Whatever the Van Ardens were building was big. Then he found blueprints for an oil rig offshore, and finally he found a photo of Cristina. Now he knew he was looking for an obsessed and analytical married man. He asked about the woman to Van Arden, who promptly revealed she was hospitalized in Dredford's General Hospital, where Hendrik was destroyed, and Julio was seen last with a family car and a familiar for security. That was the next logical place to investigate, so he bid the magician farewell and departed to the hospital in his car. On the way, Daniel kept thinking about the way Van Arden talked about his children. He sounded like a real father to them, even for Julio, calling him a grandchild. Of course, he was not crying as you would expect from a normal person. After all, he was a vampire, but he clearly sounded in mourning, as if his children were in fact really dear to him. That made him think about Father Michael. Did the priest really think about him, as Van Arden thought about his children, or was it manipulation? He felt conflicted about his sire, but then he remembered his speech about promising eternal life and forbidden pleasures to his victims. Even if Father Michael was like a father to him, he still was a murderous monster. He still was the midnight fiend. Most people have fathers, but not all fathers were like Van Arden. He parked the car inside Dredford's General Hospital's garage. The place was cold and humid. A flickering light badly illuminated the space, and drops of water echoed from the pipes that crossed the ceiling. He walked around searching for clues, and his eyesight was not bothered by the darkness. After a while, he finally found some shell casings and grains on the floor that he quickly realized were ashes. He touched it and felt it between his fingers. Suddenly, he felt removed from time itself. His senses were transported to the past, and he saw the battle that unfolded with his own eyes. He saw Hendrik saving Julio and putting him inside the car. He saw Ivan turning him into ashes at the same time. The car made its escape from the garage as if he was there. Still transported into the past, Daniel Reed tried to follow the car that escaped with Julio but couldn't. His senses flickered between past and present, making it impossible. He looked around and noticed drops of blood on the floor, and he did the same as he did with the ashes. His senses were transported again, but the appearance of the place slightly changed, as if he was looking now through the lenses of a different person, and now he could follow the car long enough to see its plates. The detective collected some samples of blood and ash from the ground and went outside. Since he was in a hospital at night, there was a chance he could find a police cruiser outside. The hunch panned out, and he approached the vehicle as he exuded his supernatural charm on the cop. The man greeted him, and was more than happy to check the plates for a fellow investigator. The plates were in the name of a company called Van Arden Gas and Oil, which did not surprise the detective. He then asked if he could help him find said vehicle, which again, the police officer was more than happy to oblige. After a couple of hours, the cop received the location of the vehicle through the radio. It was on the northeast of the city near the train tracks, which was recognized as territory of the Tower, as it was explained by Father Michael. Daniel asked kindly for the vehicle to be left alone and that no further investigation should take place. The cop was more than happy to comply and even gave Daniel his card in case he needed any help before the detective departed. Daniel arrived at his destination, parked and started to investigate the car almost immediately, but suddenly the hunger assailed him. Since he got into the garage of the hospital, he felt that each time he used his supernatural powers, the thirst grew more, and now it was starting to feel unbearable. He looked around and the neighborhood was completely abandoned, no one around. He thought about looking for stray dogs or rats, but remembered they could transmit diseases, and that got him frustrated. Anger started to bubble inside him, and he felt as if something ancient and evil was trying to crawl out of his body. He heard a prolonged high-pitched scream of an eagle that came from deep inside his soul, making him instinctively close his eyes and cover his ears. He felt suffocated by the hunger, and when he opened his eyes they were luminous, blood red, and he was growling. He closed them again, trying to regain control over himself with all the will he could muster, and when he opened the eyes a second time they were normal again and the growling slowly faded. He needed to feed, or else he could commit something terrible. He sifted through his wallet and found a business card. He got his cell phone and dialed the number, and a young woman answered.
Well, well, well. Hello, little cousin.
Mary, I need help. I am thirsty. Really thirsty.
Okay, cousin. But it's gonna cost you.
I can pay you in gold.
It's gonna cost you extra for an express delivery.
I don't care. Send it. Send it fast.
Okay, tell me where you are.
20 minutes went by that seemed like years, but a man with a backpack in a motorcycle arrived. Daniel paid him with 2 gold coins and got 3 pints of blood from the man who left promptly. Daniel went through the blood like a rabid animal, but he had to agree with DuPont. This was not as good as what he drank in the church. Now the thirst was held at bay, but somewhere in his soul he could still feel a low growl. Now he could give the necessary attention to the matter at hand. He cleaned his mouth and walked to the car of his mark. Daniel was still light-headed, but started to investigate the car. He noticed some dry blood on the bottom of the back door, and there were some signs of struggle near the car. He found some shell casings that matched the previous ones he found in the hospital garage. He deduced that the struggle was between Julio and the familiar, but why? He discerned marks on the terrain that seemed like footprints and followed it. It seems that one of them was running from the other. Was the familiar working for the tower as well? He was tempted into displacing his senses into the past, but was afraid that it would make him hungry again. He decided to do this the old-fashioned way with good detective work. He followed the footprints and on the way found more shell casings. But now he was walking on concrete in an alley and lost the trail. He kicked a can and sighted. That's when it hit him. The smell of blood. It was not fresh, maybe from a day ago. He did not know how he could possibly know that, but he did. It was faint, but he knew he could follow. The smell took him into an abandoned building across a junkyard. It was easy to get in, and the place was in absolute darkness. The smell of blood was very strong now. He went up to the next floor, and in a room with no windows there it was. The corpse of the familiar. Daniel approached it to analyze it when suddenly a flash of fire almost burnt him into a crisp. He moved a few steps away from the corpse and saw Julio supported by his cane, with fire on his other hand.
So you found me, scum!
He hurled another volley of magical fire in Daniel's direction, who barely dodged.
What are you talking about?
You know it!
Julio dropped his cane on the floor and recited an incantation. His other hand was covered in flames, his eyes went blood red, and the corners of the room were set ablaze.
I swear I will burn this place down with you if you don't take me to her!
The room was quickly getting covered in flames. Fiery debris was falling from the ceiling, and Daniel started to feel a fear he never felt before. He felt that monster rattling the cage in his soul for the second time this night, but now it was a lot harder to keep it caged.
Stop it! I don't know what you're talking about.
Not until you will take me to where she is!
Daniel closed his eyes, and when he opened again it was red like Julio's. He growled and took his stake from underneath his jacket. Julio noticed and with his flaming hands pointed at the ceiling directly over Daniel, making it explode and fall over him. For the first time, the blood inside Daniel burned like gasoline, and he saw everything in slow motion. He saw the ceiling falling down and on instinct got out of the way. He moved like Father Michael did when they first fought. He looked at Julio and saw the surprise slowly rising in his face. The detective pointed the stake, and in less than a second crossed the whole room, piercing Julio in the heart as they broke through the wall of the corridor behind him. Julio did not turn to ashes as Daniel expected, but he was immobilized with his eyes open still, with a surprised expression. The magical fire in the other room was extinguished, except for the places where it spread. Daniel put them out and turned to Julio. Somewhat instinctively, he knew Julio could hear him and was conscious.
Listen, I am Daniel Reed. I am a private detective hired by your grandsire, Adrian Van Arden, to find you and take you safely to the library. I am not here to hurt you, but to help you. I'm going to take this out of you if you promise me not to set me on fire.
Daniel stood there and realized the vampire could not answer him. He sighted and turned around, looking at the burned place. Suddenly he heard inside his mind.
Agreed.
Daniel turned, smiling back to the vampire. Amazed, he proceeded to remove the stake from his heart. Julio gasped for air instinctively and slowly got on his feet. Daniel extended a hand. The magician looked in distrust for a moment, but accepted.
So, Daniel, I am sorry for my behavior. I thought you were one of the members of the tower.
Yeah, I figured. Now come, you are safe now. I'll take you to Van Arden.
No, I can't. Not yet.
What do you mean? The familiar who betrayed your family is dead. We can leave.
He did not betray my family. I betrayed him.
Julio turned his back, fighting his shame.
When we left the hospital, he wanted to take me back home, but I convinced him we should stay. My wife was in the hospital and we needed to get her out before coming back. We saw the Russian man and the woman living with her, so we followed them into the junkyard across the street. We meant to storm it and rescue her, but the more I used my magic to help us, the stronger it got. We were planning the assault in the car when it struck me. Being a good familiar, he offered himself. As I began to drink from him, I felt a monster inside my soul, like an animal that could not be sated.
They were silent for a moment.
I fought it, told him to run. He did, but I could not keep the Nephilim at bay anymore. The owl inside me wanted his life. He ran, we fought, but well, you know the rest.
Daniel looked away. He remembered Father Michael telling him that one day he might end a life like the priest did to Sarah. The horror grabbed him by surprise when he realized all of them. Father Michael, DuPont, Bloody Mary, Van Arden and his children, even himself, were all monsters behind this very thin veneer of humanity they displayed when playing the theater. They were monsters. They were Nosferatu.
Don't worry. It happens to all of us sooner or later.
He put his hands on the magician's shoulder, trying to comfort him. For some reason, he forgave Julio for his indiscretion. Did that mean he should forgive Father Michael? Or did it mean he was losing himself to the monster beneath?
Now let's save that wife of yours.
Julio shared with him the intel he had on the junkyard. His wife was in a little shed, guarded by 5 familiars. One Nosferatu came once to check on them early at night and left, and was not the Russian man nor the brunette woman, someone who felt less powerful.
So we should wait for him to come and get in sometime after he leaves.
Perfect. The Nosferatu came right before you got here. We should move.
Daniel agreed, and the vampires went out to stalk the night. They moved across the street and faced the chain-link fence. Daniel burned his blood and ripped through the fence with brute force so he and Julio could go through. They stalked through the shadows and noticed one of the familiars keeping watch of the terrain. Moving in silence, Daniel passed by the familiar unnoticed through the right. Julio went through the left but stepped on an empty can, calling the familiar's attention, who caught him with a flashlight. But before he could make a sound, Daniel bit his neck, and the only sound was the familiar gargling and drowning in his own blood. Julio winced for a moment with the gore visual, but kept his head straight on the mission. When they got near the shed, they noticed 3 men on the entrance talking amongst themselves. Daniel got a rock from the ground and threw a couple of yards away, making a noise. 2 of the men got up to check the sound. Julio made his way to the remaining member and hit him in the head with a rock, and he immediately fell unconscious. The other 2 split to cover more ground, allowing Daniel to dispose of them discreetly with the butt of his gun. He came back and met Julio. They looked at the door and got in. A man held a gun to Christina's head, and both knew that he was not a familiar, but a vampire.
So the court sent you 2 to retrieve her. That's not gonna happen,
he said with a smile.
Leave her with us and we will let you walk out of here in one piece.
I'll have the hostage here, court scum. I call the shots. I can't believe you would risk an eternity for this bloodsack.
That's my wife!
A bloodsack for a wife? That's rich court hypocrisy at its best.
What do you mean?
I mean, I can smell Nosferatu blood in her mouth. She's on the juice.
Daniel looked disappointed at Julio.
No, impossible. I never did this. Mr. Blomkamp told me he would give her medicine. She has cancer.
Cristina cried in silence, visibly terrorized, and the vampire from the tower started to laugh. A tear of blood struck Julio's face.
I did not know. Cristina, I did not know.
You are disgusting.
Julio screamed in agony, pain and rage. His eyes were luminous and blood red as he set the clothes of his enemy on fire. Cristina screamed bloody murder in fear. The vampire holding her hostage shot the gun to her head almost at point blank, and Daniel saw all of this in slow motion. He ran as fast as he could like an eagle diving for the kill just in time to push Cristina away, and so he would take the bullet for her instead. The vampire caught fire and turned to ashes. Cristina fainted and Julio went for her.
We have to get her out of here!
Daniel agreed and they left. On the way back, inside Daniel's car, they were silent. Julio caressed Cristina's face, bloody tears streaking his own. Daniel was silent. He thought about biting the neck of the man in the junkyard, about the familiar Julio had killed by mistake, about Cristina surviving cancer on vampiric blood. What kind of fresh new hell was he living? Was all of this worth it to avoid death? Maybe not. Maybe Sarah O'Connor was the lucky one. In Dredford's public library, Julio was in deep meditation, his face contorted in a frown as the eldritch symbols and formulas of the Ars Sanguinis flew through his mind. Candice, his teacher, wanted him to expand his control to a second element, as was the norm between students of the art. He had an easy time mastering fire, but air, his chosen second element, has been a much slower process. The mage tried an incantation and tapped into the power of his blood, but the air inside the room refused to follow his will. Julio could not fully concentrate on his studies. He was worried about his wife, Cristina. She had been traumatized since her kidnapping, and worse, she could not receive a full explanation from everything that happened because of the laws of the Nosferatu. Unless she was under sanguine fealty, she could not leave the library, as she already knew too much about Nosferatu affairs. Recently, she had started refusing her treatment, and soon after, her cancer returned. Time was running out and Van Arden was working diligently to get authorization to bring her into the blood, but the council was denying it. The justification was that House Ashkari had recently brought Julio into the blood, and there are other houses more in need of expanding their numbers. A small fire spontaneously started on a table nearby. Julio stopped his meditation and with a simple gesture put out the flames. Such was the risk of trying to work Ars Sanguinis without a clear mind. Julio was worried about Daniel too. His friend had almost lost his eternity thanks to an attack. Daniel had also been working overtime to distract himself from the world around him. Maybe it was time to pay him a visit at the cabin in the woods and help with Vittorio's case. Julio closed the door to his practice room when he heard a voice behind him.
Julio, do you have a minute?
It was Agnes, the second eldest of the 4 remaining children of Van Arden. She was a young woman with light brown hair and wearing huge glasses. There was something frail and aloof about her appearance, but she usually was friendly and kind to him. She was carrying a heavy book in her arms.
Of course, Agnes. What is it?
My crew, the Ebony Dagger, wishes to invite you and your crew for a parley.
The Ebony Dagger, Agnes? Are you kidding? Our last encounter was not very friendly, to be very honest with you. Koch has shot an arrow at my colleague and would have me shot had I not defended myself.
Cochise can be too blunt. I apologize. We have discussed it and we all agreed to. Yelena wants to clear the air between our crews.
I don't know where such a meeting could take place safely. If the wrong people got wind of this, it could be trouble for both our crews.
There is a place we can agree is safe for this meeting, here in the library. Van Arden is grateful to Daniel for his help in bringing you back, and he is the only member of the council that the Ebony Dagger has no quarrel with.
Are you sure? No tricks or arrows, huh?
You have my word.
Julio relayed the invitation to his companions the same night. To his surprise, Daniel, who was the one he expected the most resistance from, easily agreed to the meeting. Eloise had nice words to say about Cochise and agreed. Tom had no beef with the Ebony Dagger, but was cautious about the whole idea. The one who most opposed it was Oliver. He kept saying Yelena was trouble and that they should not push their luck. In the end, it was up to Julio to break the tie, and after careful consideration, he voted for the meeting. The Midnight Fiends were in need of allies, as Nayati had counseled, and he trusted Agnes. The next night, at the agreed time, the Midnight Fiends arrived at the library, ironically at midnight. Someone at the Ebony Dagger had a sense of humor. Before they went in, Tom Bridges took Oliver to the side.
I want to apologize for the other day. I was feeling guilty and I ended up taking it out on you.
Nah, there is nothing to apologize for. Your words had truth in them, and I still want to make things right. No hurt feelings?
None on my side.
Both of them smiled, shook hands and caught up to the rest of the group in front of the library. The building was dimly lit and silent. The air had a faint reflex of the arcane. Agnes was right inside, waiting for them.
Guys, this is Agnes. She's an older sister to my sire Hendrik. She's also the librarian here and knows a lot about more subjects than I can even fathom.
Julio exaggerates. I think I already know a little about each one of you from his stories. In the name of the Ebony Dagger, I thank you all for being here.
After a quick greeting, the librarian took them to a huge room that had been prepared for the meeting. The room was full of bookshelves and had a large table in the middle. There, sitting at the table, were the Nosferatu of the Ebony Dagger. The 5 vampires stood up to greet them.
This is Cochise from House Volkos.
I misjudged you, Daniel Reed. For that, I apologize.
Too soon to say that.
A masked woman, she seemed to resent the reunion and scanned each of the Midnight Fiends thoroughly. They could see cold eyes staring at them through the slits of the mask.
This is Virginia from House Orlok.
Just remember, this meeting was not my idea. It was Yelena's, and I was vocal against it.
I am happy to see you are well, Eloise. I wish all your companions the same.
Cochise interrupted, annoyed at his crewmate's behavior, and shook hands with Daniel and Eloise.
Water under the bridge, Cochise.
You gave us quite a scare.
After Cochise, Agnes pointed to the next one among the Ebony Dagger.
This is Obadiah from House Leviathan.
You were the customers from the other day, I remember you.
He shook hands with Tom, Oliver, and Daniel.
I know some of you are still new to the blood. Nosferatu are not very welcoming, and the human resources department sucks. If you want to catch up, I know a very good bar near the occult shop called The Coffin. We can see people having fun and sit down to have a relaxed talk. I would love to. It just needs to be discreet. Of course.
Obadiah greeted Julio and Eloise and returned to his place.
Well, this is Amanda Noir from House Morrigan. I heard some of you have met her before.
Amanda timidly greeted them.
Ms. Noir, a pleasure seeing you again.
Thank you once again for your help.
Have you achieved what you searched for, Mr. Oliver?
We got the documents we needed, but someone has blown them up along with Daniel. He barely survived. After that, all related documents mysteriously vanished from the city halls.
Oh, I'm so sorry to have put you at risk.
No need to feel guilty about that. I knew what I was getting into when I accepted the case. As I said before, I don't like leaving a case unsolved.
Thank you, Daniel. But as we agreed, there are more important things for us to worry about right now.
Don't tell anyone I said it. But soon in your future, someone or something is going to open another door for you to reach the answer you seek.
Amanda winked at him and proceeded to greet the remaining Midnight Fiends, leaving Oliver mystified.
Lastly, this is Lady Yelena, Marquise of the East Side, from House Strix, our leader.
Agnes pointed to a blonde woman wearing a slinky red dress. There was a visible intensity about her, piercing blue eyes displaying courage and beauty, only surpassed by the mysterious aura she exuded. She walked like a model, but stood tall like a proud warrior. Her charisma was inebriating and contagious.
Well, if it isn't Daniel Reed, the city's most elusive detective, I thank you all for accepting our invitation. Come, let us sit and discuss what brought us here.
What do you want with us? I'm not in the mood for games.
Take a seat. The Ebony Dagger does not play games. There is too much at stake.
Daniel Reed took his place, and so did the other Midnight Fiends. Yelena slid into the seat opposite to him with feline grace, her smile as sharp as a blade, her beauty sparkling like diamonds.
Daniel, calm down. You agreed to it.
What is it then?
I have made it my business to know each of you. The renown of the Midnight Fiends has spread like a wildfire in Nosferatu circles, and I have ears in all of them. After saving Spectre's right hand, he tried to destroy you, Tom. Julio lost his sire to the tower, and the council has yet to answer it. Eloise, you were accused of murder by your own house. And Oliver, you tried to solve a mystery of your bloodline only to become a target of hidden agendas. Do you see what I see?
They stayed silent. A feeling of impending doom started to grow inside the Midnight Fiends. They started to realize exactly what was happening here.
We see, Lady Yelena. Do you suggest we should do something about it?
How, Oliver? I heard amazing things about you. Smart, industrious, successful, so much like your own sire. Don't tell me you inherited his cowardice as well.
You know Nicholas?
Of course we know each other.
Her eyes sparkled.
You don't know? He is keeping you in the dark to protect you.
Oliver shifted uncomfortably in his seat.
What do you mean?
It is not my place to tell. Do you see now, Daniel? This is a proposition. A chance for us to finally break free from the King's Council.
Daniel could not help but raise an eyebrow. Eloise and Oliver, as the oldest among the fiends, understood perfectly. There have been rumors in the city that some vampires were dissatisfied with the king and his council. Some believe that it is time for someone new to bear the weight of the crown, and Yelena was known to be one of them.
You want us to rebel against the council? That's suicide. They'll hunt us down like dogs.
Not if enough Nosferatu do it together. You know as well as I do that the council's grip of the city is tightening with each passing night. They control everything, every deal, every decision. It's time someone stood up to them. For the first time in decades, they have been dealt a blow with the recent attacks by the tower.
And what makes you think we are up for the job?
You have been working for the members of the council and have acquired quite the reputation. You clearly have all it takes to make the difference. You just have to find within yourself the desire to do so.
This is absurd. Even if we were to agree, and I'm not saying we are, why exactly should you wear the crown, Yelena?
I don't need to wear the crown. I just wish to see change. Decent people representing each house of the blood and the council. The houses do not need an overbearing council or monarch breathing down their necks like petty tyrants.
So what's in it for you?
Her smile faded, replaced by cold steel determination.
I'm tired of living in fear, Mr. Reed.
The answer took Daniel off guard. Of every possible answer he could get, one as vulnerable as that was not common among Nosferatu, especially someone of her station. And living in fear of the council was a habit he knew very well.
Let me tell you the story of Gomez, a Nosferatu who does not walk with us any longer. Army soldier, special ops, retired. One of the toughest men I've ever seen in my eternity. Moved to Dreadfort and started a private security company. One of the best, and caught the eye of Jacob Holloway. The Duke was looking for someone to improve and modernize the security system of that grotesque skyscraper.
The members of the Ebony Dagger knew the story well. They all averted their gazes in brooding silence as the Midnight Fiends were caught mesmerized by her personality, like moths into flames.
Gomez was brought into the blood of House Dracula and was immediately put to work with all the resources at his disposal. That building is one of the most secure bases of operations in the world. Security, protocols, surveillance, all state-of-the-art. That building can survive a nuke if it's needed.
As she spoke, her charisma burned brighter. Eloise felt like that was a leader she could follow into battle. She was the firebrand this corrupt city needed to change. Julio, in his turn, was captivated, but thought she was too idealist. Her fire could burn bright, but it would burn fast and spread to those standing by her side.
Of course, I tried recruiting him. That was a man that could make a difference. A man of integrity. But he refused. He would not go against Holloway. It was against his principles. But as soon as the work was done, the Duke had him destroyed, to keep the details and the vulnerabilities of the system only to himself. We did our part. In the last moments he reached for help, but sadly, we were too late.
Tom grunted. He knew very well this kind of betrayal that was common among vampires, ungrateful, conniving bloodsuckers. He felt it twice. Oliver, on the other hand, remembered Gomez, but the stories that circulated among the board was that Gomez was falling under the weight of the dragon. The madness was such that he was accused of conspiring with enemies of the throne.
You see, Mr. Reed, this is what our council is capable of. They use and discard whoever they need And this is the exact same position your crew is in right now.
Yelena looked inside the eyes of each of the Midnight Fiends. In some of them she could see doubt, in others rejection. But it was clear she had already convinced some of them. She let the silence hang for a few seconds more before continuing.
House Ashkari is unfairly treated with prejudice thanks to the deeds of the previous head of the house from more than a century ago. The betrayer. House Morgan was hunted to the brink of extinction. The truth is that the king is, at best, a weak coward who allows his son and cronies to run wild and terrorize the city while he hides. At worst, the king is the one responsible himself. If I am to be called a villain because I want to put a stop to this madness, I welcome the insult with pride. This city is broken. It's time we put it back together. I am not afraid of the storm that will follow.
These are lofty words. But I remember one of your children, Manfred Voigt, took a girl prisoner against her will. I had to help her escape.
Yelena looked surprised and caught off guard. Virginia grunted and was ready to intervene, but Yelena answered Daniel first.
He has not been well, I admit it. But delivering the girl to DuPont was a mistake, Mr. Reed. Jessica deserved better than...
Yelena was interrupted by the sounds of several people approaching the room. Voices were speaking in hushed tones as the steps came closer and closer. Finally, the door to the meeting room was opened abruptly. Pierre Dupont, Duke of House Strix, entered the room victoriously. He was followed by the whole council, Caroline Graves, the rancher, Van Arden, Holloway, and Spectre. Right after came in the Shire Reaver Bartholomew with his horsemen, and so did Father Michael and Don Vittorio, along Leviathans from the police and Orlok rat groups, rapid assault teams. The previous occupants of the room were astonished by the sudden arrival of so many vampires.
My dear sister!
I'm not your sister, and Justine was not my mother. She was a monster like yourself.
Dupont continued as if nothing was said. He took a cell phone out of his pocket.
We were discussing new rights to blood when we received this.
He pressed a switch, and a recording of Yelena's voice filled the room with the conversation, where Yelena invited the Midnight Fiends to the rebellion. His smile grew each time he pressed the switch, to move from one recording of her voice to the next.
I'm glad you are not afraid of storms. That's good to hear, sister, because you and your black knife just sailed into one.
He made fun of the name of Yelena's crew. All the vampires of the Ebony Dagger stood up, getting ready to defend themselves. The Midnight Fiends also got up. Eloise and Tom took steps, standing with the Ebony Dagger, while Julio and Oliver did the same, but with the members of the King's Council. When the four Nosferatu noticed that they were not all going the same direction, they hesitated. They looked for Daniel Reed, who was standing still in the middle. Eloise looked at Daniel, pleading with her eyes for him to do what she felt was the right decision. Oliver was visibly confused.
Daniel, what are you doing?
Dupont turned to Daniel, visibly displeased, and that made Daniel feel guilty. For some reason, the Duke's approval was very important to him.
Daniel, step aside. You bloodlings have done enough.
A struggle happened inside Daniel's soul. He wanted to stand by the Ebony Dagger, but when Dupont commanded, the eagle inside the detective obeyed.
This does not concern us. We should stay out of this business.
The Midnight Fiends returned to Daniel, and as a group they moved away from the table without taking any side. Oliver patted him on the shoulder, agreeing with Daniel's decision, but Eloise was upset. When she looked into his eyes in disappointment, he averted his gaze in shame.
We have to do something to defuse the situation.
Defuse the situation? It is time we got rid of this council.
It's out of our hands now.
The rancher stood at the side of Dupont, with bloodlust visible in his eyes. Obadiah broke a chair to improvise a stake. Cochise drew his bow but kept it pointed down. Virginia menacingly stood in front of Yelena, Amanda, and Agnes to protect them. Agnes had her hands with the gestures of an Ars Sanguinis spell at the ready. Amanda seemed nervous and uncertain, but a vigilant observer could notice a knife sliding from her long sleeve into her hand.
Can you explain what is happening here in your library, Van Arden? Why are rebels using it to plot against us?
Adrian Van Arden took a step closer.
Agnes, Julio, what is happening here? I demand an explanation now.
Both Nosferatu stood in embarrassed silence.
Well, no need to waste time. I invoke a vote for the destruction of the guilty party of all this vulgarity.
You want to destroy Obadiah?
I cannot believe I just heard you propose the destruction of my daughter.
Calm down, both of you. I said the guilty party. Yelena. Let's not waste blood and be done with this pointless rebellion. Can we get a unanimous vote?
The rancher immediately moved his gaze from the ebony dagger to Dupont, dissatisfaction visible on his face.
In this case, I agree.
Caroline nodded, adding her vote to the count, but Spectre took Jacob Holloway to the side for a private talk before the vote could continue.
We can't allow DuPont to have what he wants.
Why not? Yelena has always been a thorn on our side. Good riddance.
I understand your dislike for her, but this is not a move to destroy rebels of the King's Court. This is a move to unify House Strix. If we allow him to remove Yelena from the game, Bloody Mary will soon follow, and he will have united the largest house in the city. We do not want to create another Justine, Jacob. One was more than enough.
Holloway stopped on his tracks and looked back to Dupont, passionately trying to convince the rancher and Van Arden. His gaze then befell the rest of the members of the Ebony Dagger. Why not quash all of the most important members of the rebellion right now? Sure, Van Arden would complain for centuries, but he was isolated. There was nothing he could do. They only needed the rancher to get a majority vote, and he would gladly oblige. Caroline, well, everyone in the council knew she would obey Dupont. His leverage over her was overwhelming if the rumors were true.
Your reasoning is sound. Well, he needs a majority vote. If we vote against it, he needs both Van Arden and the rancher to get her sentenced to destruction. I just have to convince one of them to vote with us.
Both Holloway and Spectre returned to the other members of the King's Council, as Dupont continued to make his case to the rancher.
I want to say a few words. There is a serious matter of non-negotiable values here. Freedom of speech and the right to criticize should be protected by this council, even if used against us. To say something and to act on it are two different things. Every Nosferatu should look up for the King's Council as the guardians to these inalienable rights.
Excuse me, have you gone mad?
Under the guidance of your Serene Highness, we should be magnanimous. Our policy must be oriented by deontological ethics. Destroying her for mere words is unthinkable. Strix Nosferatu are always too boisterous.
Are you deranged?
Dupont was incredulous. Words failed him to describe the audacity of the vampire lawyer.
I agree with Holloway.
What do you mean by this buffoonery? You had members of House Dracula destroyed for a lot less. And you have been trying to kill that Orlok bloodling from the Midnight Fiends. And worse, you dared to send Daniel and his crew with a fake bomb to the sewers so he could be destroyed by—
I acted to protect the house and the King's Court. The matters involving the dragon Nephilim and the instability it saddles us with are of the utmost severity. Your Nephilim is the eagle. It only makes you indulge your vices. You don't know how it is to be oppressed by the dragon.
The discussion was interrupted by the sound of a chair being cut in half. Yelena was holding a gladius in her hands.
I won't stay put while you two go on with this. Be warned that we are not going to submissively accept your decision. If you want to pick a fight, be ready for the consequences.
Sacre bleu! We cannot disregard this. You all heard. She wants to take advantage of the blows the tower has dealt us recently. You lost important Nosferatu to these blows. She is a threat to the stability of the court. Bartholomew, if you please, take her into custody.
I'm sorry, Your Grace, but the Reaver's office answers to the King and His Serene Highness Council, and I am yet to hear its decision by majority.
The Reaver answered, pouring as much sarcasm he could over the royal pronouns. The eagle inside Dupont screamed in hate, and his face was distorted by anger, but the Reaver only smiled, showing his fang. Dupont gave a step in his direction, but the horseman got in his way. The sound of a mob invading the library reached their ears. Don Vittorio entered the room and closed the door in a hurry.
A mob of Nosferatu has gained access to the library. We had no alternative to letting them in, or else we could have a severe breach of the theater. Now they are threatening to invade the room if the Ebony Dagger is hurt in any way. My men are keeping them off, but this can escalate into an utter mess.
The sound of angry yelling and people banging against the door and walls soon filled the room.
You're not the only one who knows how to take advantage of voice recorders and cell phones, idiot.
She showed a small device in her left hand.
I had supporters ready nearby just in case. They have been listening to everything you said from the instant you arrived.
Screams of protest could be heard coming from inside the library. Caroline moved to take the device from Yelena, but Obadiah interposed between them and held her arm.
I'm sorry, but I cannot allow you to do this.
Caroline and him had a face-off for several seconds in silence. Obadiah let go of her arm, and she took a step back.
Let's be pragmatic. We cannot decide this question surrounded by hostiles. We need to call off the voting.
These hostiles are rebels and work for her. She is the problem. Let's solve it.
What is happening? Julio, are you all right? What is all this noise?
A woman entered the room. She had a worried expression on her face, and she was holding a flashlight. All vampires could clearly hear her accelerated heartbeats and smell the blood coursing through her veins. She was indeed the only one alive inside the room. Julio felt terror spread through his soul. It was his wife. He needed to get her away from here fast.
Cristina, you shouldn't be here!
Why is this place so dark? Who are all these people? I am hearing a loud noise coming from here. What is happening?
Julio pulled her into his arms protectively.
It wasn't anything, you...
I apologize. She's just a familiar working here in the library. Please, Julio, escort her back to her quarters and return here immediately.
Julio nodded and took his wife out of the room. She resisted a little, but they left without anyone getting in their way.
We should start considering ways for us to flee this place to somewhere safe.
Fleeing? We are going to crush these rebels. Spectre, you and I have already casted our votes. Take command of your rat groups and hold the back of the library. I'll take the Leviathans and deal with the main enemy force, and then I'm going to reinforce your position.
Agreed. Wait a second, I can solve this voting problem in no time. Rancher, you owe me for the situation with Mudd and Elijah. It was House Strix who helped you. Now is the time to pay back the favor. Van Arden, you too are in debt. We helped bring your grandchild back from the clutches of the tower. To sweeten the deal, if you vote for her destruction, I can vote for the right to bring someone new into Ashkari blood, like you were asking for.
All eyes were on the rancher and Van Arden, waiting for their votes. Amanda took a deep breath, like she just finished an inner conflict and finally found the resolution for her next step. The knife in her hand slid back into her long sleeves, and she raised her hand.
May I address the council? I want to make a plea.
You may, child, but do it quickly. We have quite the kerfuffle in our hands.
Amanda stood in front of the rancher and looked into his face as she spoke.
The council has asked several times for my service and to use my Eye of Horus. I offered to change my previous position regarding this. I am ready to leave the Ebony Dagger behind and stay at the council's disposal for any service or job at your discretion, if you vote against destroying Yelena.
The rancher's gaze stood firmly on the Nosferatu from House Morrigan before him, and a wicked smile grew on his face, with murdering intensity in his eyes.
Do you agree?
She asked nervously, and after a terrorizing pause, the rancher nodded positively.
That is 3 votes against her destruction.
But I don't. I won't allow you to throw yourself into the hands of these monsters, Amanda.
Yelena, please! You must fight another day. This way we can prevent bloodshed. Neither you, my friends at the Ebony Dagger, nor the people who support you outside need to bleed today. I've made up my mind.
It is official. With the 3 votes, there is no need for further discussion. Without majority, no destruction is possible. Amanda Noir is removed from the Ebony Dagger and is now at the disposal of the Council. Do you agree with this solution, Van Arden?
Van Arden also nodded in agreement.
Sacrilege! I will not forget this, Holloway.
DuPont stormed out of the room, and Holloway simply gave him the cold shoulder. Yelena and Amanda kept looking at each other until Yelena broke eye contact. With visible anger, she called the members of her crew and retreated from the room. She had to fight the eagle inside along each step of the way. Agnes hugged Amanda and soon followed the rest of the Ebony Dagger, leaving her behind with the council. When Yelena's supporters saw her coming out of the room unscathed, the commotion stopped. The crowd followed outside and soon dispersed as best as possible to keep up with the theater and not call for any more unwanted attention. Virginia approached Yelena.
I told you the Midnight Fiends were trouble. They just stood there like idiots.
This was not their fight.
I am worried. How did they know about the meeting?
I don't know. But do you think they are going to destroy Amanda?
No. The Ranger may want to do so, but for now, Holloway and the Council are going to be happy with their prize. And this is not how it ends.
We are not leaving her behind for long.
Inside the library, Father Michael patted Daniel in the back.
You did well, my son. You should all rest. You are still saddled with the case Vittorio brought you.
I want to know if everything is okay with Julio before leaving.
Was that mortal woman Julio's wife?
Yes, that could have gone much worse if Van Arden had not intervened.
Tom looked full of worry to the door that Julio and Cristina had used to leave the room a few minutes earlier. Deeper inside the library, Julio was climbing a flight of stairs back to the surface level above ground. He heard a noise and saw Van Arden waiting for him at the top of the staircase.
How is she, Julio?
She's resting now. She was very nervous and took quite a while for her to relax.
There is something bothering me.
Are you preoccupied with the secrets and treasures held within the library? With this many Nosferatu here, they might be in danger.
No. There was no risk of them finding anything here tonight. All the important assets of House Ashkari have already been moved to the oil platform. I have something else to speak about with you. DuPont already knew what was going to happen here before it started. He had everything in place to catch the ebony dagger red-handed.
Do you think they have a traitor in their midst?
No, it was one of you midnight fiends who helped DuPont.
Van Arden took a parchment outside his robe.
This blood covenant was signed as a non-disclosure agreement by Mr. Reed on the day I hired him to find you. Today, its terms have been violated. This means he has revealed information from inside this library to some unauthorized party.
Julio was dumbfounded. He could never expect something like this from Daniel.
I could have activated the spell in the blood covenant, and Mr. Reed would have been reduced to ashes. However, I understand that the issue at hand may be more intricate than first imagined, and hasty judgments are not advised.
Van Arden extended the parchment to Julio.
You are a full-fledged Nosferatu of House Ashkari. I trust you to investigate the issue at hand and choose how to best deal with it, considering the interests of our family. Use it wisely.
The parchment weighed heavily on Julio's hands. How should he proceed? Would he be able to choose to activate something that would destroy Daniel? No. Maybe he should discuss this with the Midnight Fiends, with everyone or without Daniel being present. Julio was still worried about the Midnight Fiends being divided when they were called to take sides in the conflict that almost happened inside the library. Was this the first sign of a fracture? Julio pocketed the parchment and knew he would have to think long and carefully before deciding what to do with it. Julio arrived at the library and immediately went to look for his wife Cristina, but she was nowhere to be found. He looked in every room and chamber. Van Arden and his children did not see her leave as well. The woman simply vanished. A chill ran up his spine. The other Nosferatu of House Ashkari checked their wards and no one had invaded the library. He felt his world crumbling and desperation started to set in. He checked every room and every chamber, calling her name. He started to become frustrated and suddenly he was surprised by the sound of a clock hitting the next hour. In anger, he punched the clock several times and threw it on the floor, completely destroying it. He broke down and fell to his knees, blood tears streaking his face as his screams calling her name cut through the night. Tom was in Dredford's public library. Julio found himself consumed by worry for his wife. He glanced at the clock in front of him, shattered into irreparable pieces by his hand in a fit of rage. He felt frustrated and overwhelmed. The broken clock was a cold reminder to him that time was slipping away. She needed her medicine made from vampiric blood, and if she did not take it, cancer would claim her life soon. Every second counted. The sounds of someone approaching behind him cut through the somber silence. It was Candice, one of Van Arden's children, and an older sister of his sire, Hendrik. Since his sire was destroyed by the tower, she was tasked to be his teacher in Hendrik's stead. Her expression was stern, her eyes piercing as she regarded Julio with a serious gaze.
That antique has been in our family for more than 150 years. My father brought it from the old world as a reminder that time was of the essence for his mission, not unlike yourself, right now. It stood in the halls of Maria Theresa herself, in the days she was challenged by Frederick II.
I'm sorry. I'm worried sick about Cristina. I did not think.
Exactly. You did not think. Is Cristina back now that the clock is destroyed?
He silently fumbled for words.
You and her have cost this house dearly. Do you even realize that? House Ashkari has invested a rare right to blood on you. We took Cristina in and provided her with care despite her reluctance. And don't you forget we lost Hendrik because you needed to visit her at the hospital. You needed it.
But I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for Christina's illness, nor Hendrik's death.
Oh, poor thing. Have you just realized that there are things in the cosmos that are out of your control? That's your problem, Bloodling. In your desperation to control what you can't, you fumble around making rash decisions that cost others, and still, you feel the need to soothe your ego by playing victim.
I just wanted to save my wife.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Julio. Have you ever thought that maybe she did not want to be saved if it meant to live like this?
He closed his eyes and felt overwhelmed by guilt as blood tears slowly stroked his face.
Regardless, it does not change the fact that our house has been paying a lot for you. Our leader, Van Arden, has been working tirelessly to earn another right of blood for Cristina to help you. Yet, all we've received in return are complaints, refusal to comply with the treatment, and your inability to learn a meager second basic element of ars sanguinis.
I am trying. I'm doing everything I can.
No, you are not. Instead of listening to your sire and focus on your studies, you are off goofing around with your little posse setting the city on fire, which is basically all you can do. Even the element of color, the one element you can't use in more sophisticated manners.
He had no response. Indeed, the politics and investigations were clearly derailing his studies.
To destroy is easy. It takes clarity and iron will to persevere and create.
She approached the broken clock, and in a whisper she recited an incantation, followed by a gentle blow of air over the pieces, and the clock was fixed.
We are doing everything in our power to find your wife, but if she is found, are you going to be ready to do whatever must be done, or are you going to continue in this sorry state?
No, I won't.
Feeling the weight of her words, Julio retreated to his room with a heavy heart and a sense of resignation. The next night, Julio found himself in a much better shape as he stood before Candace's magical study within the library. He knocked on the door, and when he heard her voice telling him to come in, he resolutely stepped inside. The room had a huge blackboard filled with intricate diagrams and formulas. Candace was deeply engrossed in her work with a huge orange crystal as she recited an incantation and allowed 2 drops of her blood to touch it.
Candace, I've been thinking about what you said. I need to learn more, to become better.
Are you asking for my help?
Yes, I am. Will you teach me?
The woman nodded, pleased by Julio's determination.
Very well. But know that I expect nothing less than your full commitment. Take a seat.
As he took his place, she began to wipe the board in preparation for their lesson. However, Julio interrupted her.
Before Hendrik was destroyed, he was beginning to tell me a lesson he never got the chance to finish.
Is that so? What was he teaching you?
About the history of House Ashkari.
She appeared to be moved by the revelation.
I see. I can complete Hendrik's lesson.
Candace's expression was somber as she began to recount the ancient tale. Her tone carried the weight of centuries-old secrets.
In the ancient land of Mesopotamia lived a wise man named Utnapishtim, renowned for his wisdom and resilience in the face of great adversity. He survived a great catastrophe that engulfed many. His tale had reached the ears of Tiamat, the first Nosferatu. She was impressed and saw great potential in him. She sought him out and offered him a unique opportunity: immortality as the founder of a new house of Nosferatu. He recognized the potential for greater knowledge and understanding that immortality could offer. So Utnapishtim accepted Tiamat's offer and embarked into the quest she gave him, becoming the founder of the House of the Owl. Or, as our house would be called for the time being, House Utnapishtim. Despite the allure of immortality, Utnapishtim found himself grappling with the complexities and challenges of his new existence. He soon realized that being a vampire came with its own set of risks and problems. Despite retaining his wisdom and intellect, he was increasingly tempted by the darker impulses that lurked within his undead heart.
So even though he was wise, he still struggled with his vampiric nature.
Exactly. He battled to reconcile his thirst for blood with his desire to uphold his moral principles.
Julio nodded, absorbing the weight of Utnapishtim's internal conflict. Something about it felt eerily familiar.
One of the foremost concerns that weighed heavily on his mind were the Nephilim. The power they have over him and the other Nosferatu threatened to overwhelm his sense of reason and integrity. So he dedicated himself to studying the vampiric condition, striving to understand it better than anyone else. Some say he learned as much as Queen Tiamat. Some dared to say he learned even more. During this time, it was widely believed that magic was beyond the reach of Nosferatu. Yet Utnapishtim defied convention. He delved into the depths of vampiric blood, unlocking its latent power and pioneering the development of ars sanguinis. His mastery over the vampiric essence was so profound that even the queen sought his knowledge in the arcane arts. His next step was to look for a way to shackle the Nephilim within him, to diminish its power and influence. Through a painstaking ritual, he succeeded in mitigating the severity of the Nephilim's presence within, but the victory came at a cost.
Julio leaned forward, eager to learn more, and Candace's expression grew grave as she continued the tale.
Ironically, in binding the Nephilim, Utnapishtim found his own thirst for blood magnified. His once subdued hunger for blood grew into an insatiable craving, a constant torment that gnawed at his immortal soul. The Ashkari are known for their unquenchable thirst, a trait that sets them apart from the other houses of the blood. You have a greater thirst than any Nosferatu around your age, and you always will. For this reason, other houses are cautious about allowing too many Ashkaris to reside in one place. We quickly become a significant drain on the blood supply.
Julio knew very well the immense thirst she was talking about. He drank a lot more blood than his companions, the other midnight fiends. Also, he spent a lot of blood in his practice of ars sanguinis, so he could see how the scarcity of blood could escalate exponentially.
This new insatiable craving made him very bitter with his immortality. He decided to turn into an hermit and rely not on his newfound powers as a vampire, but on the lessons of his past life as a mortal sage. There came a time when a warrior sought out Utnapishtim, yearning to uncover the secrets of immortality. Our founder, in his wisdom, cautioned the warrior against his pursuit. He spoke of the fleeting nature of mortal life, urging the warrior to cherish his humanity. After the warrior left, Tiamat came to visit him seeking his counsel. It turned into a debate. He warned her that she was threading a dangerous path and would lose herself to the Nephilim, as the other founders would also risk embarking on her plans. Tiamat was intrigued by his insight and questioned how he came to know of the Nephilim of the other founders. He proceeded to give her an explanation about each one of them. He spoke of visions, of whispers from the unknown, suggesting that their actions were not solely their own, but guided by unseen hands, perhaps even by forces beyond their comprehension. However, the queen would have none of it and urged him to join her and the other founders in their assault on the mages. Tiamat presented 3 compelling viewpoints to sway him. First, she invoked the memory of her murdered husband, Apsu, painting a vivid picture of the betrayal the mages had wrought. Second, she appealed to Utnapishtim's wisdom, highlighting the unchecked power and hubris of the mages. She knew he understood the dangers of any power that is for too long left unopposed. But it was the third reason that truly swayed him. Tiamat offered him the chance to shape the future of their kind, to become a teacher among the Nosferatu. She promised he would have the opportunity to share his beliefs, vision, and knowledge, guiding the coming reign of the Nosferatu towards a better path.
So it would be right to say that it was the prospect of influencing the future that drew him out of his isolation.
Indeed. Utnapishtim recognized that if the age of the Nosferatu was inevitable, he had to ensure the secrets he had discovered were safeguarded and available, lest the Nephilim of the other houses go unchecked. So he agreed to help her on 3 conditions.
What were the conditions?
That's the thing, Julio. The specifics of those conditions have always been a matter of debate among his children. No one ever quite agreed on what they were. Some say it was to ensure the protection of certain secrets. Others believed it had to do with limiting Tiamat's influence. But whatever they were, the queen must have accepted them, because he stood by her side when she returned. In the aftermath of the first strike against the mages, the golden era of the Nosferatu was established. Utnapishtim took the role of an intellectual. It said that he was the founder who least brought mortals into the blood, preferring to impart knowledge rather than immortality.
What about his children? What were they like?
Our Babylonites were truly remarkable, each gifted with unique talents that contributed to the legacy of our house. The witch, known for her mastery of ars sanguinis. She worked alongside her sire to develop the intricate blood magic practiced within our house for millennia. The exorcist, gifted with the ability to banish creatures from other worlds and the strength to combat other supernatural powers. The astronomer, a brilliant mind in the natural sciences, was known for his genius in observing the stars and developing technologies far beyond his time. And finally, the teacher, a timeless symbol of wisdom and enlightenment, who was solely dedicated to advancing the understanding of metaphysics, ethics, and the pursuit of knowledge among both mortals and Nosferatu. Our lodge, the House Ashgari of Dreadford, came from the blood of the astronomer.
Our house and its founder, they go back so far. It's even hard to fathom. And ars sanguinis is such an intricate and detailed science. The depth of knowledge required to master it, it's astounding.
Candace's eyes narrowed slightly.
Insightful observations, Julio. But insight alone won't save you. You've mastered fire with ease, but your struggle with air is unacceptable. This isn't just about your personal growth. It's about survival. The four humors of ars sanguinis allow us to cast powerful magic, but they also affect us. Too much reliance on one element can have disastrous consequences. You are already showing signs of excessive use of color.
Julio looked down, feeling the weight of her words.
I didn't realize it was affecting me that much. I just felt the power of fire was easier to grasp.
Ignorance is no excuse. You must start balancing it immediately. The effects can become irreversible if ignored. After this lesson, we will focus relentlessly on your training until you master air as well as fire.
I understand. I will do whatever it takes to achieve balance.
Candace's expression softened slightly.
Good. Now, let's delve into another topic of our history: the origin of our house's name. In fact, ours was one of the first houses to abandon the name of its founder. It happened during the rise of the Persian Empire, long after the age of the founders. At that time, the Magi, a priestly caste led by mortal mages, waged war against our kind with fervor. They had created a special military unit. One of their captains was a man known today only as Lashkar.
Lashkar is a Persian word for troops and soldiers, isn't it?
Yes, that's the reason the word was used to identify him. Lashkar was among the best of the Magi's soldiers, tasked with hunting down and destroying members of the House of the Owl. The Magi despised our ars sanguinis, considering it a mockery. Lashkar, driven by a desire to become a mage himself, served the Magi with unwavering dedication. He hoped to be rewarded for his loyalty by being granted the gift of magic. But his dreams were shattered when he learned from a scholar that mortal mages could not turn others into mages.
To dedicate one's life to a cause, only to have it crumble before you, it must have been devastating.
Indeed. Consumed by despair and betrayal, Lashkar confronted the Magi, demanding answers. When his worst fears were confirmed, he retreated to the desert, seeking solace in solitude. In his darkest moment, Lashkar encountered Paranda, a member of our house who offered him a different path. He could make Lashkar into a mage, but not a mortal one. He could turn him into a Nosferatu of the House of the Owl and teach him ars sanguinis. And of course, Lashkar accepted it. He was brought into the blood and rose to become one of the strongest among us. The hard work of the Magi and their troops had brought our house to the brink of extinction. But with his knowledge of the Magi's tactics, he led our house in a fierce counterattack. During the battle, the mages kept mocking him, telling he was no mage and was still just a Lashkar, for blood magic was no true magic. And when Lashkar, against all odds, secured his greatest triumph, he did something remarkable. He took the insult hurled at him by the Magi and embraced it. He made the insult his own, turning it into a symbol.
So the name Ashkari, it was born out of reclaiming dignity from scorn.
This happened a long time ago. It was the last age in which our house was unified. Over the centuries that followed, House Ashkari became synonymous with power, intellectuality, and arcane wisdom. Our members were renowned not only for their master of ars sanguinis, but also for their insatiable thirst for knowledge. We grew in number, bringing men and women of the mind into the blood. However, power breeds jealousy and conflict, and our house was not immune to internal strife. Rivalries and ambitions festered, leading to betrayal and treachery. This threatened to tear the house apart, and eventually, it did. House Ashkari split into several lodges. As time passed, these lodges drifted away from each other, pursuing their own paths and goals.
That's tragic. To see something so powerful fractured by internal conflicts.
Yes, but despite the challenges we face, the legacy of the House of the Owl endured. It continued to stand as a bastion of magical knowledge and arcane might. Its name, whispered in both reverence and fear by those who sought to harness the power of the supernatural. Sons and daughters of its blood, wielding ancient sorcery and dark secrets passed down through generations.
Candice gazed on Julio with an intensity that mirrored the weight of the tale she was about to share. Julio, eager to learn more about the intricate web of Nosferatu lore, listened intently.
There is one very famous vampire closely related to our bloodline, and her tale serves as a stark warning about the perils of ambition and the importance of restraint. Have you ever heard of Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess?
Elizabeth Bathory, a vampire?
Candice nodded.
Mortals often attribute only the latter years of her tale to her, but she is much older. Bathory was born around the 7th century near the Carpathian Basin. As a young woman, she was brought into the blood of House Ashkari. Her aptitude for blood magic quickly became apparent. She possessed an insatiable curiosity and an unparalleled skill to learn our art. She accomplished something rare. She expanded our art in new directions and developed new rituals. Using her powers, she influenced mortals, playing their political games to accumulate power and prestige for her chosen figureheads. Accustomed to getting her way, she attempted something which was thought impossible for Nosferatu of our house. She made her grand ambition to reunify all the disparate lodges that had emerged since the time of Lashkar, to create a unified House of the Owl. Over centuries, she traveled across the known world, engaging in diplomacy, fighting adversaries, and bringing new Nosferatu into the blood. She offered secrets and the use of her powerful magic as incentives, manipulating the ambition of her allies and enemies alike. However, she was fiercely opposed by several lodges who cherished their independence. They would not bow to her ideal. This inner turmoil plagued our house for centuries, which only fueled Bathory's determination. She realized she would need more power to complete her goals. It was during this time that she developed and conducted immense blood rituals, reminiscent of the pagan rites of old.
So she resorted to bathing the blood of others?
Yes. She bathed in the blood of powerful mortals and Nosferatu to enhance her own power, and in the blood of young women to enhance her beauty. Rivers of blood were shed in her infamous activities. By the late 16th century, Bathory had adopted the infamous identity that made her notorious among mortals. She retreated to her castle in Slovakia with her closest apprentices and children. There, she plotted something monumental, but she got careless, and her actions led to a severe risk to the theater. Mortals discovered the horrors she had committed. This prompted several kings' courts to intervene and maintain the veil of secrecy and misdirection that protect our existence from being discovered by mortals. This was no longer considered a matter of internal politics of House Ashkari. All houses united to correct the situation. She was tried and convicted for her crimes. According to mortal records, she was walled into a room in her castle, where she supposedly died a few years later. For Nosferatu, it was decided that her apprentices at her castle were to be destroyed.
What really happened to her?
It is still argued to this day. Some believe she remains imprisoned deep within her castle, while others speculate she was destroyed.
Candace paused briefly, considering if she should continue.
Several lodges trace their lineage back to her bloodline, including ours here in Dreadford. She is the grandsire to Van Arden, and through him, she is one of your ancestors, along with his brother Arthur Walker and his child, our cousin, Valentina.
Julio's mind raced with the implications as he absorbed the information.
Hendrik told me our lodge was sent here for a vital mission. He said all our eternities rely on this mission being successful.
He told you about that, huh? Well, Van Arden was a Dutch privateer who served under a lodge headed by one of Bathory's children, Celine of Cinedanos. She harbored a long-standing grudge and engaged in a shadow war with a lodge from the Iberian Peninsula, whose most famous child is the Betrayer, the former king of Dreadford. When the Great Betrayal occurred, Celine sent Van Arden here with a mission to aid the city against members of the Lodge of the Betrayer. Our mission was to hunt and kill all Nosferatu who were part of it and affiliated with him.
Did they succeed in their mission? Hendrik seemed troubled when he spoke of it.
Yes, mostly. However, there were complications. You should not worry about this for now. Our lodge did assist the new council, which earned us a place in the King's Court of Dreadford, but with considerable reservations. Everyone was cautious about House Ashkari after what the Betrayer had done. We work to this day to normalize our standing. And with this, we conclude the history lesson. The last teachings Hendrik passed to you are complete. Now we can proceed to the lecture on Ars Sanguinis. Today we study the humor of Erythros and the elusive element of air.
It was a grueling session of arcane theory and practice, but Julio was determined to see it through. They spent long hours practicing arcane incantations and studying old parchments. After Candace finished her lecture, she left Julio with a series of mystical exercises to practice alone. As the hours stretched on and the sun was almost rising, he still immersed himself in the intricate gestures and incantations that Candace had taught him. He focused intently, channeling his blood. The story of his house seemed to be immersed in ambition, magic, and blood. He considered his own ambition. The memory of Hendrik, his mentor who fell to the tower, weighed heavily on his mind. The image of Cristina held at gunpoint flashed before his eyes, reminding him of the dangers they faced. His recent battle with the carrion eaters replayed in his thoughts, a testament to the perilous world he now inhabited. Amidst these memories, Julio felt a stirring within him, a deep-seated will fueled by a desire to protect those he loved. And then, in a moment of clarity, he felt it, the surge of energy, the subtle shift in the air around him. Julio had cast his first air spell. The incantation flowed from him with newfound confidence, and the air responded to his command. A gentle breeze stirred within the chamber, swirling around him in a testament to his mastery of his second element. For a brief moment, Julio stood in awe of his accomplishment, marveling at the power he now wielded. Cristina stood in her new, sparsely furnished studio as she worked hard to rebuild her career as a sculptress. The echoes of her chisel against marble were the only company she had in Dreadford. She had uprooted her life in Brazil to be with her husband Julio as he took on a demanding job offshore, building an oil platform. The holidays had come and gone, each one spent alone, her husband's absence a heavy presence in this unfamiliar metropolis. The distance and loneliness weighed heavily on Cristina, but her art provided a much-needed solace. Julio's accident had been a harsh blow. It cost him the movement of one leg, and their fight about him returning to work lingered in her mind for a long time. He had promised it would be over soon, and they could leave Dreadford behind and return home. But until then, she was alone, sculpting the hours away, the cold of the studio sinking into her bones. The strong smell of her working materials were ever present. The statue was a depiction of an ancient figure with mysterious and captivating features, a silent sentinel that seemed to watch over her as she worked. Its face, though unfinished, already held a somber, almost melancholic expression. As she focused intently on the delicate details of the statue's eyes, she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. She paused, her breath hitching. Before she could process what was happening, a violent cough racked her body, and she doubled over, her hand instinctively covering her mouth. When she pulled her hand away, it was smeared with blood. Her eyes widened in shock and horror. She looked up at the statue, and her breath caught in her throat. The blood she had coughed up had splattered across the statue's face, giving it the eerie appearance of weeping blood. The crimson streaks ran down the clay cheeks, accentuating the sorrowful expression she had painstakingly crafted. Cristina stared at the statue, her mind reeling, a vivid reminder of her mortality. She reached out with a trembling hand to touch the blood on the statue's face, and her fingers smeared it further. But it was of no use. The image of the blood-streaked face was seared into her consciousness. The diagnosis came suddenly: cancer, aggressive. She tried to reach Julio, but the offshore world swallowed him entirely. She was admitted to the hospital, each day a struggle. Her prospects were grim. When Julio finally arrived, guilt etched deep into his features, and they spent precious moments together. She noticed the weight of his guilt, his presence a bittersweet comfort. Miraculously, she felt better the next day. The doctors were astounded. Julio and Cristina spent the entire day together, her energy boundless. Night fell, and as if a cruel joke, her condition deteriorated rapidly, plunging her into unconsciousness. When she awoke the following day, she felt well again. The doctors were bewildered. Her cancer had inexplicably vanished. They kept her under observation. Their optimism was infectious. Julio, however, disappeared, leaving no word behind. Days passed, and Cristina noticed strange changes. She felt tireless, her senses heightened. She could hear the whispers from other rooms, the rhythmic beating of hearts, the scent of blood permeating the air. Her strength seemed unnatural. She shattered a cup with a mere grip. She left deep imprints on a metal tray. Fear crept in. Was she going mad? As the doctors prepared to discharge her, she looked forward to returning home, eager to reclaim her life and work. But one night, as she stood on the cusp of freedom, strange figures entered her room. Darkness enveloped her. In the shadows of Dreadford, Cristina's story was just beginning. She slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the dim light filtering through gaps in the ceiling. It was made of rusty metal sheets. She sat up, still feeling the unusual strength coursing through her body. She looked around, and she seemed to be at a junkyard. Her senses reached farther than before. There was someone else with her inside the room, a huge man, maybe the tallest she had ever seen. He stood a few feet away, watching her with an inscrutable expression.
Where am I? What happened?
The man approached her calmly. Somehow she felt he was not a threat to her. Was something altering her thoughts?
We are in a junkyard, Cristina. My allies and I brought you here after we took you from the hospital.
Took me? Who are you?
My name is Ivan, but among the Nosferatu I am simply known as the Preacher.
He pulled a chair and sat near Cristina. Her emotions were evident in the way she tensed as he neared. She concentrated her heightened feelings and noticed the man did not have a heartbeat.
Rest assured, I mean you no harm. I brought you here to tell you about a bargain your husband has pledged in his name and yours.
Julio, where is he?
You are going to meet him again soon enough. You had cancer, Cristina. You were at death's door and suddenly you recovered by a miracle. Not only that, I know you feel different, healthier, sharper, stronger.
Cristina's interest was piqued. How did he know that? Instead of asking another question, she resolutely waited for his answers.
Your husband earned your current state of good health by selling himself into the service of a family of Nosferatu, a family of vampires. And without knowing any better, he also sold you.
Vampires, please.
Ivan allowed his countenance to hint at how terrible a truly unshackled vampire could be. The woman's words died in her throat.
You might not believe it, but deep inside you know it is true.
He approached her, and his presence made her coil. Something about him was alluring and dangerous. He fixed a lock of her hair, and her eyes closed in terror. Something about him made her skin crawl.
With but a word, I could make you commit terrible sins, and with a bite I could drain the life of you to sustain my own.
She opened her eyes, and his eyes were luminous red, and his mouth bore a pair of fangs that awoken a primal fear inside her. She scattered to the other side of the bed, creating distance between them.
I could go on demonstrating it to you in more vulgar ways, but our time is limited, and I do not wish to insult your intelligence. I believe the message is clear. You yourself have proof of what I say within you. People don't beat cancer in an afternoon and develop gifts of the blood from their deathbed, Cristina.
The woman took a few moments to choose her next words carefully.
Who are you truly? Why are you here talking to me?
As I said before, your husband has bargained his service to a family of Nosferatu, House Ashkari. This family serves a court of vampires that rules over Dreadfort from the shadows. I am an enemy of this court and the house he serves, Cristina. I am part of the Tower, a faction that opposes those who turned your husband. If I had my way, they would be no more, unless they stop acting as instruments of the corruption that curses this city.
Vampires. It is so hard to believe.
Is it though, Cristina? Why do mortals recoil from the dark? Why are they afraid to look under their beds? Because deep inside their souls, they know we and other creatures stalk them.
Why would they need him? Or me, for that matter?
Ivan's eyes narrowed, but his body did not move. No breathing, no heart palpitation. He looked like a stoic statue glaring at her.
Because Julio is valuable to them, and they knew using you would bind him to their cause. They needed leverage, and you were the perfect bargain.
And how can they cure me when no doctor could?
Many of our gifts can be considered ungodly, but suffice to say, there are ways that one might consider unnatural, if not evil. Why don't you ask Julio's new family about it? You might also want to inquire about the risks this treatment imposes upon you. See for yourself if they are going to act honestly, or if they will keep you in the dark, to control you just as they control him.
You are saying he is some kind of slave to these vampires, and me as well?
You will be treated differently, but you'll still be their familiar, a slave bound by their rules and by their blood.
I won't be anyone's slave, rest assured, but why are you telling me this?
Ivan gave her an intense look, and his eyebrows furrowed.
Because I am giving you a choice. You can continue down the path Julio has set for both of you, playing the role they've designed. Or you can take control of your own destiny, find true power, and perhaps even free Julio from their grip.
And why should I trust you if you are one of them, as you said?
I am a Nosferatu, yes, but not one of them. They are my enemies. Nothing would please me more than working towards their ruin. I want to give you a chance to break free from their chains.
But Julio, he's my husband. I can't just abandon him.
I understand your loyalty, but Julio is no longer free. He's a slave to his new masters, bound by their laws. If you decline my offer, you'll never have control over your life again. But if you choose to fight, you can gain the power necessary to free him from the king's court.
I can't betray him. I cannot accept what you offer me.
Ivan handed Cristina a seal.
See for yourself what awaits you down this road. If you want to find the means to fight back, go to the E station of the subway. There you will see a homeless man with a black dog begging for money with a metal mug. Instead of money, offer him this, and he will bring you to me.
Cristina took the seal. It was crimson red with the design of a tower engraved on it.
I won't be a slave, not to them, not to anyone, not even to you.
Good. Then I hope we'll see each other again.
Cristina watched as Ivan went away, clutching the seal tightly. She felt confused, but she was sure of one thing. She will not be a pawn in a game. She will fight for her freedom, and if possible, for Julio's. Soon after that, Cristina was rescued by Julio and a detective. She was brought to Dreadford's public library by them. Cristina slowly regained consciousness, her senses coming alive in the dim, musty air of the library. The heavy scent of old books and ancient wood filled her nostrils as she blinked her eyes open, the world coming into hazy focus. Beside her, she felt a familiar presence, and as her vision cleared, she saw Julio's worried yet relieved face. Without a word, they embraced tightly, the warmth of their connection piercing through the cold uncertainty that surrounded them.
Julio, what's happening? Where are we?
He held her close with his hand gently stroking her hair.
We are safe now, Cristina. I got help. You're safe here.
She pulled back slightly, searching his eyes for answers.
Who were those people? Why did they take me? What is going on?
Julio looked away with a pained expression.
I can't explain everything. There are laws and rules I can't break. But they want to hurt us, Cristina. Hurt me, you, and all the vampires who help us.
Cristina's eyes widened.
Vampires? Julio, I need to know more. What's happening to me? Why can't we go home?
He sighed heavily, the sound filled with resignation.
It is not safe to return home. We could be targeted again. And right now, the most important thing is to make sure you are 100% okay.
Cristina's frustration bubbled to the surface.
But I don't understand. Who are these vampires? What do they want with us? You gave blood for me to drink?
I didn't know it was blood. I made a deal so they would help you get better. I myself still barely understand their world.
How could you make a deal you didn't understand? We need to take a step back and think clearly about everything.
Julio gently took her hands.
You've seen too much, Cristina. Know too much. The only place you're safe is here, in the library. This place is under the protection of House Ashkari. The court can't enforce their punishments against you here. If they knew about you, they'd either erase your memories, bind you under sanguine fealty, or even worse.
Cristina's mind raced.
So this means we have to stay here forever?
Just for now. Until it's safe, until we can find a way to protect you.
I want our privacy, our own space. But if this is the only way to stay safe...
It is. We can be attacked again if we leave.
Cristina nodded slowly. The reality of their situation settled heavily on her shoulders.
All right, Julio, we'll stay. But promise me we'll find a way out of this together.
He embraced her again, his voice firm with resolve.
I promise we'll get through this together.
After their talk, Cristina was attended by familiars, those bound to serve the vampires. She was led down winding staircases to a subterranean room within the library. The walls were lined with ancient tomes and the air was cool, almost damp. The familiars were courteous yet detached, their eyes reflecting lives of quiet servitude. One of the familiars told her to let them know if she needed anything, with a voice devoid of emotion. Cristina couldn't help but notice the bizarre nature of her surroundings and the peculiar demeanor of the familiars. There was an eerie stillness to the place, a sense of age and secrecy. Despite her unease, she cooperated, remembering Julio's plea for her to stay calm and comply. The next day, Cristina experienced a strange realization. As the sun reached high noon, Julio was asleep as if in a death-like slumber. She approached him with her heart pounding. His skin was cold, and his body was utterly still as though he were truly dead. The sight chilled her to the bone. She could only imagine if this was the same to the other vampires. The familiars brought her any belongings she wished, and were always ready if she needed anything. As she roamed the library day after day, Cristina observed their lives. They moved about, performing their duties with practiced precision. She could not remove from her mind the thought that they lived as servants. Their existence was bound to their vampiric masters. She noticed how differently she was treated compared to them. While the familiars were largely ignored, she received a special status, an unspoken recognition of her unique situation. Julio spent as much time with Cristina as he could, trying to inject a sense of normalcy into their strange new life. Yet, it was clear to Cristina that things were different now. Julio's presence, though comforting, lacked the warmth and vitality it once had. Some nights, he would leave without explanation, disappearing into the shadows of the library or the outside world. She, on the other hand, found herself confined within the library walls. She noticed a familiar who always seemed to be watching her, ensuring she never left the premises. The other vampires went about their business and paid her no mind. She made a point to stay out of their way. One night, Cristina found herself wandering the halls of the library, drawn by the sounds of clashing metal and grunts of exertion. She followed the noise to a dimly lit room where Julio and one of the vampires, Sebastian, were engaged in a fierce duel. They moved with fluid grace, their swords flashing under the flickering lights. Julio, typically a man of science, seemed oddly at home in this brutal dance. Sebastian was relentlessly pushing Julio to his limits. Their swords clashed and whirled in a deadly ballet, each strike met with a precise parry. Cristina watched, transfixed, as Sebastian suddenly drove his blade into Julio's chest. She gasped, horrified, her heart pounding in her chest. Blood seeped from the wound, and for a moment she thought she had witnessed her husband's death. But the vampires around her remained unfazed. Julio, despite the impalement, stood firm. With a grimace, he withdrew the sword, the wound already beginning to close. Cristina realized with a shock that what would be a mortal injury to a human was merely a temporary inconvenience to a vampire. As Julio continued to train, Cristina's mind reeled. This display of violence and resilience drove home the stark reality that the world of vampires was far more brutal and unforgiving than she had ever imagined. It was a place where strength and survival were intertwined, and even those like Julio, who cherished knowledge and reason, had to be adept in the art of combat. Next night, driven by curiosity and concern, Cristina went looking for Julio. She knew he was studying inside a particular room deep within the library. As she approached, she saw a familiar standing guard outside the door. The familiar's expression was impassive. His eyes tracked her movements as she drew closer.
I need to see Julio.
The familiar shook his head.
Master Julio is busy. He cannot be disturbed.
Busy with what? I am his wife, and I need to talk to him.
Master Julio is studying. He has instructed that he is not to be disturbed under any circumstances.
Studying sorcery?
Cristina pressed, while she tried to peer past the familiar into the room beyond.
Yes, Master Julio is one of the masters. He requires complete focus.
Cristina felt a surge of anxiety. She hated the distance that had grown between them, the secrets that seemed to multiply with each passing day.
Please, I just want to see him.
I understand, but Master Julio's instructions are clear. He will come to you when he is finished.
Defeated, Cristina stepped back, her heart heavy.
All right, thank you.
As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that had settled over her. The library, with its hidden depths and ancient secrets, felt like a labyrinth she was destined to wander alone. Despite the peculiarities, Cristina remained composed, determined to understand this new reality. She would bide her time and seek answers to the mysteries that now defined her life. A couple of nights later, Candice approached Cristina while she was seated at a table engrossed in a book. The vampire moved with a fluid grace, and her presence commanded attention. She placed a wine glass filled with a dark, viscous liquid in front of Cristina. Cristina looked up, her brow furrowing in confusion.
What is this?
She eyed the glass warily. Candice's expression was impatient and her tone blunt.
It's your medicine. Normally it would be disguised, but you already know the nature of it. So there is no reason to waste time pretending it is anything else.
Cristina's eyes widened as the realization dawned on her.
Is this vampire's blood?
Yes, it is.
Cristina recoiled slightly, shaking her head.
I have no intention of drinking this.
Candice's gaze hardened, and she leaned in closer, her voice low and serious.
If you don't drink it, your cancer will return and take your life.
Cristina's resolve wavered for a moment, but she steeled herself, refusing to be swayed.
I hope it does. This is no way of living.
She said, hard as stone. Candice's eyes flashed with a mix of frustration and resignation.
One of us was destroyed to give you and Julio this opportunity. This is not something to take lightly.
Cristina stood up, her muscles tensing as she prepared to flee if Candice tried to force her. But Candice merely sighed and turned away.
It is your choice. You know the consequences of refusing it.
With that, Candice walked away, leaving the glass of blood untouched on the table. Cristina stared at it, her mind a whirlwind of fear and defiance. The choice was hers, but the weight of it felt almost too much to bear. She still refused the blood no matter how much Julio insisted. They fought over it. As the days passed, Cristina found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the gravity of her situation. One evening she sought out Julio for a serious conversation. She was determined to get answers. She found him in a quiet corner of the library, surrounded by an alchemical apparatus and books. He was working on something. Blood. It smelled like it.
Julio, we need to talk.
Her voice was firm as she approached him. He looked up, and his expression softened as he saw her.
Cristina, what's wrong?
She sat down beside him, her eyes searching his.
I need to understand what's going on. The things you're doing, the magic, the blood. I need to know the truth.
Julio sighed, running a hand through his hair.
I am trying to protect you, Cristina. Everything I did is for us.
But why do you need to be so secretive? What exactly are you doing when you leave me here alone? Where do you go?
Her voice trembled with a mix of frustration and desperation. Julio hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words.
I cannot tell you everything, Cristina. The King's Court has rules, secrets I must keep. But I promise, it's all to keep you safe.
Cristina leaned forward with pleading eyes.
Why do you insist I take that medicine? You know it's vampire blood. I know if I don't take it, my cancer will return. That vampire woman was clear on that. But taking it, it's not right, Julio. It's blood taken from someone. And I know there are side effects when you drink vampire blood.
Julio's expression grew serious.
I have learned how to handle those side effects.
He pointed to a flask containing blood that was part of the apparatus he was working on before she arrived. He took the flask and offered it to her.
It's my blood, and I am the one who prepared it. You just need to trust me.
Trust you? How many people have been bled dry so I can live? So you can perform your magic? How much harm has been done in the name of keeping us safe?
Julio left the flask over a table and reached out, taking her hands in his.
I've spoken to Van Arden. He's working to secure the right to blood for you. The situation is going to end soon. The council denied us, but an opportunity is approaching. A masquerade ball at winter solstice. We just have to hang tight until then.
A familiar rushed in with urgency in his eyes before Cristina could respond.
Master Julio, there's been an explosion. Daniel Reed was caught in it.
What? How?
He was attacked at his motel room. He is languid. Eloise is taking him to Volkos territory. She asked to tell you to go there immediately.
Julio stood up abruptly. His mind was clearly racing.
I need to handle this, Cristina. I'm sorry. I need to go.
Cristina watched him go, feeling the weight of their conversation still heavy on her heart. She was left alone once again, with more questions than answers, the flask of blood still untouched on the table. Night after night, Cristina sat in her room, surrounded by books and papers, trying to lose herself in study. Ever since she had come to this place, her mind had been unable to focus on her work as a sculptress. One night, as she tried to concentrate, she heard screams and loud noises echoing through the library. Uneasiness settled over her, and she dropped her study materials, her heart pounding. She took a flashlight and went to find out what was happening. She heard voices nearby as soon as she stepped into the darkened library. The place felt even more ominous than usual, with shadows playing tricks on her eyes. She crept closer, straining to make out the conversation.
Let's be pragmatic. We cannot decide this question surrounded by hostiles. We need to call off the voting.
These hostiles are rebels and work for her. She is the problem. Let's solve it.
What is happening? Julio, are you all right? What is all this noise?
She stepped into the room, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The vampires turned to look at her, their eyes glowing unnaturally in the dim light. She could smell blood and see their inhuman features. To her, they all looked like monsters, even Julio. Cristina's heart raced as she recognized her husband among them. Julio's face was a mask of terror as he saw her. He moved towards her quickly, his voice urgent.
Cristina, you shouldn't be here!
Why is this place so dark? Who are all these people? I am hearing a loud noise coming from here. What is happening?
Julio pulled her into his arms protectively.
It wasn't anything,
I apologize. She's just a familiar working here in the library. Please, Julio, escort her back to her quarters and return here immediately.
Cristina felt a surge of anger at being called just a familiar. She resisted a little as Julio led her out of the room, but they left without anyone getting in their way. Back in her room, she was fuming.
I've had enough of this, Julio.
Julio tried to calm her, his voice soothing.
Cristina, please. It's for your own safety. Just try to rest.
It was right then that she finally understood. Her husband was lost to their games, to their world, and she was helpless to do anything about it. She was just a burden to him, to the vampires around him, even to the familiars that were tasked with helping her. He was a slave now, and if she did nothing about it, she would become one as well. She would fight this court, and for that she needed strength, whatever the cost might be, even if it was taking a road to hell. She laid down to sleep, but her mind was still racing. As soon as Julio left, she got up and went to the place where she had hidden the seal Ivan had given her. Her conversation with the preacher echoed in her mind. She took the seal and stared at it for long hours. In the end, she made her choice. No one would decide her fate for her. Cristina knew she had to flee the library. As she was prohibited from leaving due to the watchful eyes of a familiar, she needed a plan. She decided to make her move in the afternoon when the familiars were busiest handling mundane tasks and the vampires were asleep. Next morning, she approached one of the familiars who was always hovering nearby.
I haven't been able to sleep properly. Normal sleeping pills aren't working because, well, you know, I'm altered by the blood.
The familiar nodded sympathetically.
I understand. We have something stronger, crafted by the masters. It's common for familiars with insomnia. I'll get it for you.
A few minutes later, the familiar returned with a small vial of a powerful sedative. Cristina took it, thanking him profusely. She knew this was her chance. She studied for days the right moment and way to administer the sedative to the familiar who kept watch over her. When the time came for her plan to be launched, it was a simple matter. Within minutes, he was out cold. She quickly hid him in a storage closet, ensuring it would take hours for anyone to find him, maybe even until the next day. Once outside, she breathed a sigh of relief, the cool evening air filling her lungs. She made her way to the coordinates Ivan had given her. She was surprised she still remembered them so clearly. Cristina reached the E-station, scanning the area, until she spotted the homeless man with the black dog. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached him and offered the seal Ivan had given her. The man's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the seal. Without a word, he nodded and motioned for her to follow him. He led her through a series of dark, twisting corridors in the subway, finally arriving at a secluded platform. A train waited there, looking old and forgotten. The man gestured for her to board. Cristina hesitated for a moment, then steeled herself and stepped onto the train. The doors closed behind her with a hiss, and the train lurched into motion. In an underground chamber dimly lit by a reddish light, Ivan stood before a group of vampires.
We can't win against the court. We are outnumbered and often outmatched.
A bloodling vampire said.
Strength does not always come from numbers. It comes from understanding your true nature, embracing it fully. Each of you has the potential to surpass even the strongest of their ilk. But you must be willing to let go of your fear and embrace the darkness within. However, always remember the need for discipline. Recklessness will allow this darkness to devour you all.
A familiar approached the group of vampires.
Master, there is a woman here to see you. She is sure you would receive her. She had this with her.
Ivan let a smile escape as he took the seal in his hand.
Admit her.
The familiar looked surprised but bowed and rushed to follow his command.
Remember what I have taught you. Reflect on it. Our time will come, and when it does, we must be ready.
With these words, Ivan emptied the chamber of his students. Before Cristina arrived, he approached the huge mirror.
It worked, my lady. I doubted you. Pardon me for my lack of faith.
The mirror remained silent, its surface cold and reflective. Moments later, Cristina entered the chamber, her eyes filled with determination. She was caught by surprise by the huge pool of blood in the middle of the room, but tried her best to ignore it.
You were right. I am ready to take up your offer.
Ivan turned to face her, his expression inscrutable.
I am pleased to hear that, Cristina. You have made a wise decision. Now, you must know what it entails.
Cristina watched him intently, her resolve unshaken.
This will be the end of your mortal life, and you will be reborn into a new existence.
I understand, but the life I treasured once no longer exists. There is nothing to cling to, and I won't spend my remaining years as a slave.
Ivan approached her, his immense size towering over her, but she did not feel threatened. She held her breath as he reached out, tilting her head to the side.
This will hurt, but not for long.
Cristina closed her eyes and Ivan sank his fangs on her neck.